Anne Frank spent 761 days unable to step outside. For most of the hiding period, 8 people lived above a business in Amsterdam. At about 8:30, warehouse staff arrived directly below them. Most warehouse staff did not know anyone was upstairs. A dropped object or a raised voice might carry through the building. At certain hours, even flushing the toilet had to wait. They walked in socks, could not freely look out of the windows, listened for the workers below, and waited for the building to empty. Anne was 13 when this began. How could 8 people live this way for more than 2 years? To understand that, we have to rewind, not to a famous diary, but to the ordinary life that was taken away piece by piece. Anne was born in Frankfurt in 1929. After the Nazis came to power in Germany, the Frank family moved to Amsterdam. For a time, Anne had school, friends, films, and the kind of busy childhood that would later feel impossibly far away. On 12 June 1942, for her 13th birthday, she received the red-checked diary that would become her confidant. She began writing to an imagined friend named Kitty. By then, German occupation had already narrowed her world. After the invasion of the Netherlands in 1940, Jewish children were forced into separate schools. Jews were excluded from public life, restricted in where and when they could travel, and eventually ordered to wear the yellow star. Anne's freedom did not vanish in one dramatic moment. It disappeared rule by rule, place by place. Then, on 5 July 1942, her 16-year-old sister Margit received a call-up to report for labor in Germany. The family had prepared a hiding place and intended to move later that month. The notice made them leave the following morning. Anne, Otto, and Edith Frank went on foot. Margit traveled by bicycle with Miep Gijs, one of Otto's trusted employees. Anne later recalled wearing several layers of clothing. They could not leave like a family openly moving house. By the end of that day, the Franks had disappeared from their home. Their hiding place was not a remote cabin or a sealed-off attic. It was the rear annex of Otto Frank's business premises at Prinsengracht 263. The offices and warehouse continued operating in the same building. The Franks lived on the upper floors at the back. In August, warehouse employee Johan Voskuil built a hinged bookcase to conceal the entrance. A week after the Franks arrived, Herman and August Van Pels came with their teenage son, Peter. In November, dentist Fritz Pfeffer joined them. Now there were 8 people in a few rooms, with no ordinary way out and no reliable idea of when the war might end. Not every day in the annex followed the same schedule. The people hiding there had illnesses, arguments, news, unexpected visitors, and changing shortages to deal with. But Anne's diary and stories let us reconstruct the rhythm that kept returning. Before 7 in the morning, the day began with cues for the bathroom and the blackout screens coming down from the windows. Then came the moment established in the opening. Around 8:30, the warehouse workers arrived. For a risky half-hour, the people in hiding had to be especially careful. Most warehouse staff did not know anyone was upstairs. Once the office helpers arrived around 9, footsteps from above caused less suspicion, but caution did not disappear. Anne and the others read, studied, worked, and moved quietly through the morning. At 12:30, the warehouse workers went home for lunch. For a short time, the building felt less dangerous. Helpers came upstairs, bringing food, books, letters, and news from the city. At 1 o'clock, the radio was switched on for BBC News. Then the working day resumed. Anne studied or wrote. Others rested, prepared food, handled chores, or did work connected to Otto's business. By late afternoon, the office and warehouse staff were gone. After Bep Voskuil left at about 5:45, the people in hiding could move more freely through parts of the building. Evenings brought dinner, radio reports, reading, and conversations. Furniture had to be moved to make rooms usable for sleep. At sunset, The windows were blacked out again. And the next morning, they would do it again. The routine gave shape to the day. It did not make the annex feel larger. As the war continued, food became harder to find and meals more repetitive. The people in hiding could not claim official ration cards. Their survival depended on helpers taking risks to bring supplies without attracting suspicion. The pressure also shaped the people inside. Anne argued with her mother. She was close to her father but pushed against his authority as she became more independent. Sharing a room with Fritz Pfeffer frustrated her. Peter Van Pels, at first someone she found dull, became a person her own age to talk to. Their relationship changed as Anne changed. Her diary does not show a flawless girl trapped in history. It shows someone opinionated, funny, lonely, impatient, and increasingly willing to question her own earlier judgments. Anne was still growing up, even though her physical world had almost stopped. The war entered the annex through radio reports, aircraft overhead, and air raids around Amsterdam. But in April 1944, danger came much closer. On the night of 9 April, someone broke into the business premises. A passerby saw the damaged door. Soon, police came to inspect. Anne later described the police at the bookcase as one of the moments she feared most. This was not the arrest. No one was discovered that night. But it showed how fragile the hiding place was. A burglary could bring police near the bookcase. It did not explain the later raid. By 1944, Anne was no longer only keeping a private diary. She was rewriting it. Writing had become a way for her to think, to vent, and to create. She wrote stories and essays, tried a novel, and increasingly hoped to become a writer or journalist. Her diary was still addressed to Kitty, but it was also becoming the raw material for something larger. On 28 March 1944, the people in hiding heard a radio broadcast from the Dutch government in exile. Minister Gerrit Balkestein urged people to preserve diaries, letters, and documents that could record life under occupation. Anne heard a possibility. On 20 May, she began working seriously on a book about the annex, which she planned to call Het Terhuis, the Secret Annex. She rewrote earlier entries on loose sheets, cutting some passages, adding others, and continuing her diary at the same time. She did not know whether it would ever be published, but she was thinking about future readers. Anne Frank was becoming not only a diarist, but an author shaping her own work. In June 1944, the Allied landings in Normandy changed the emotional direction inside the annex. Otto marked the Allied advance on a map. The people in hiding listened closely to the radio. Liberation did not feel certain, but after nearly 2 years, it felt possible. The question changed. Not simply how long could they remain hidden. Now it was, could they remain hidden long enough? On the morning of 4 August 1944, police officers led by an SS officer arrived at Prinsengracht 263. They arrested the 8 people in hiding and 2 of their helpers, Johannes Kleiman and Victor Kugler. Anne's final diary entry was dated 3 days earlier, 1 August. The 761 days were over. People have searched for an alleged betrayer ever since. The 2022 accusation did not establish a culprit. It was challenged by the Anne Frank House. Researchers have also considered explanations that do not require a deliberate betrayal. The annex was discovered. We still do not know exactly why. After detention, Anne, her family, and the others from the annex were sent to Westerbork Transit Camp. On 3 September 1944, they were deported on the last transport from Westerbork to Auschwitz-Birkenau. At Auschwitz, the men and women were separated. Otto Frank saw Edith, Margit, and Anne for the last time. Anne and Margit were later transferred to Bergen-Belsen. Edith died in Auschwitz in January 1945. Anne and Margit died of typhus in Bergen-Belsen, most likely in February 1945. Their exact dates of death were never recorded. Anne was 15. Anne was one of 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Nazi Germany, its allies, and collaborators also persecuted and murdered millions of other people. But if Anne did not survive, how did we ever get to read her diary? After the arrest, Anne's notebooks and loose pages were left on the floor of the annex. Miep Gijs and Bep Voskuil found them and gathered them up. Miep kept them unread in a desk drawer, hoping that Anne might one day return for them. Otto Frank was the only one of the 8 people in hiding to survive the Holocaust. He returned to Amsterdam in June 1945, still hoping that his daughters might be alive. In July, he learned they were not. Only then did Miep give him Anne's writings. When Otto read them, he found thoughts and feelings in Anne's work that he had never fully known. Friends urged him to publish it. On 25 June 1947, Het Terhuis was published in Dutch. The diary readers know is not one untouched notebook. It comes from Anne's original diary entries, Anne's own rewritten version for a possible book, and Otto's editorial preparation for publication. Later scholarly editions made those layers clear. That matters because Anne was not only documenting confinement, she was learning how to write her story. Anne Frank spent 761 days in hiding. She wanted to become a writer. She died at 15, never knowing whether the book she had begun revising would be published. It was. The rooms that confined Anne for more than 2 years are empty today. The words she wrote inside them are not.